The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Is Chargers, it is Chiefs in Brazil with the entire world watching.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Gentlemen, the season is finally upon us. Hallelujah. We made it through the dead cold off season, and now it's time for football to begin again. How are you guys doing? What's going on over there in Chiefs land?
I'm excited for football. I can't say it any other way. It's finally here. Like, preseason was a nice little bit of whetting the appetite, but regular season football can't get any better than that. And Chiefs Chargers is not normally the way that the season starts, but that's a lot of fun too.
It surely is, Ryan, and I mean, we got a lot to talk about here with these matchups. Obviously, the Chiefs coming out of yet another Super Bowl appearance. It did not obviously end the way that Chiefs fans would have liked it to, obviously, but you get back to the top of the mountain piece almost. But this is another campaign here. Starting with the biggest storylines for the Chiefs, what would you say is the most important one to touch on as we get into this football game?
Right now, that with Rashee Rice out, that you have Hollywood Brown back, that you are able to put at least 2 of your 3 amigos out there, your top 3 wide receiver set, and get them after, because it's been a combination of the receiving options, the targets, as well as the protection that has slowed down this offense. And they are looking big time to prove that they can go back over the top, that they can get downfield yet again. And without Rice, it's going to be a challenge, obviously, but with Hollywood back on, and he didn't play in the preseason, they maybe could have dressed him for the last preseason game, but they chose not to, just to save him for this matchup. And obviously, it just goes to show, when you have a division rival and you have a tough team coming at you, and you got to make this trip, I think that's the best way forward and gives them a shot.
Absolutely. And with the Chargers, guys, there's a lot of changes. I think after the last preseason or game that they played in the regular season, obviously the playoff game against the Houston Texans, it was very apparent that they had to load up on weapons. In that playoff game, you look at the stat line, it is Ladd McConkey, and then there's everybody else. He had 197 yards receiving, and nobody else had more than 25 yards. And so going into this offseason, the plan was very, very clear. We have to get more weapons for Justin Herbert. It just can't have another season with the lack of weaponry to be able to arm him to do what he's capable of doing. So that's why they go out and they grab a Tyler Conklin. They go out and they get Keenan Allen back. They draft Trey Harris. They get Omarion Hampton in the first round. They go get Keandre Lambert-Smith, the wide receiver they really like in the 5th round, who could really run and really go up and get the football, and Rondé Gadsden the second, a just primary pass-catching tight end, a guy who can really stretch the field, that can really threaten the seam, and they had to improve this offense. That was the major point here. I guess the real question is how long is it going to take for all of these new elements to be able to mesh and to be able to go out there and play at the level that the Chargers needed? They didn't invest as much on the offensive line as I would have liked. They went full court press on improving the weapons, and that's going to have to show itself in game 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, and it is a great question. How long is it going to take them to get to a point where they can mesh as an offense? How long is it going to take them to get on the same page, to get some of the kinks worked out? You watched Mahomes struggle at times with Xavier Worthy last year, just not being on the same page, not having that chemistry. And I think that that's going to be a big thing playing into this game, is their chemistry that, they gained over the entire season and then working in training camp in the preseason. But also, I think one of the other biggest stories for Kansas City is what kept them from having even a chance to win the Super Bowl against the Eagles. Don't get me wrong, the defense had their own problems, and that was an issue. But it was protection of Patrick Mahomes. And what did Kansas City do this offseason? They rebuilt their offensive line to an extent. They re-signed Trey Smith after they franchise tag him, which we didn't think that they would be doing because of the extra salary cap. And then you go out and you trade Joe Thuney, who has been a stalwart and one of the best guards in football.
Big surprise there.
Huge surprise for a lot of people, but it made sense for what they were trying to do. And then they go and sign a left tackle in Jalen Moore, who's not even going to end up probably playing in this game. At least you hope he doesn't, because that would mean there's an injury of some sort. And you get Josh Simmons in the first round. Like, everybody thought he was going to be missing time this season, and he hasn't missed a snap, I don't believe, even in OTAs. Like, even going back to OTAs, I don't think he missed a snap at the left tackle position. They have rebuilt, or I guess maybe retooled their offensive line, I guess is maybe the better word. And I feel a lot better about it this year than I did last year. Obviously, you have a question at left guard, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the big question I have is, what I'm looking at is, they are better across the board when you look at their top 6 offensive linemen, not just the top 5, because Jalen Moore can play probably 4 positions on this line, and that's a huge help when you get injuries throughout the season.
Yeah, no question about it. The offensive line is a physically demanding position. There's going to be attrition. We see it every single year. It's the teams that have the best quality depth that can weather that storm while they wait for their starters to get back on the field are the teams that we routinely see at the end in the playoffs, the teams that are trying to vie for a Super Bowl championship. And that's obviously what we're all trying to do. As far as the offensive line for the Chargers, I wish they would have done more. I mean, it's one of the things that we talked about so much in the offseason, me and Daniel. Are they going to add more? It's the same center. It's the same left guard that's out there. Yes, they went out there and they grabbed the big ticket, Mekhi Becton, the 6'7", 363-pound people mover and just a straight up mauler. He is definitely going to be an improvement at the right guard position, but is that enough, right? And we'll talk about some of those key matchups a little bit later on, as I'm sure we will, because the test is going to be straight out the gate. As we know, the defensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs sports one of the most dominant interior presences in the National Football League. So will Mekhi Becton be able to stay healthy? Will he be able to open up holes for a running game that, quite frankly, was not good enough last year? That's why they go get a Najee Harris. That's why they go get an Omarion Hampton, to be able to improve a rushing attack that just frankly has to be better in 2025 for the Chargers if they want to compete. That's the storyline I'm going to be looking at, is can they be able to weather the storm on the offensive line, and did they make enough improvements on that interior to be able to handle the challenges that they're going to see, and the biggest one probably coming up on Friday.
That's going to be interesting to find out as well, because Chris Jones is not exactly renowned for just taking on triple teams and stopping the run all by his lonesome. So, let's get in some passing downs and we'll see what happens. But Becton is certainly going to be somebody that they have to know where he's at all times. And it's going to be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, it most certainly is. I think for the Chiefs, is there any other kind of storylines that you want to talk about before we move on to the biggest matchups?
The big thing is that there's one anchor in the secondary. His name's Trent McDuffie, and everything else is work in motion at this point. So it's a two-edged sword, knowing that what the Chargers need to do is utilize those new options in Omarion and Najee and come downhill. Should they get into third, they got to throw the ball. It's still not going to be exactly what it's been in the past, where you feel like the Chiefs have the advantage on third down. I don't know that that's true this time. It's going to be a brawl the whole way.
It most certainly is, and that's especially what the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman want to do. They want to make it a knockdown, drag-out, physical fight.
Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k or properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those all can save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
Ravens, Bills, week 1. It's a divisional round rematch to kick off the 2025 season.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Sunday night football. It's a big one. Everyone will be waiting for this one on Sunday night. Kevin, welcome in. I'm excited to talk with you about this game. And of course, I'm excited to get this season underway.
Yeah, this is my personal favorite matchup. Of course, maybe there's a little bias in that, but of course, you have two great quarterbacks, two great teams, two teams that are hoping to obviously get to a Super Bowl and knock off the Chiefs. And of course, I think that starts in week 1. I always say September losses don't matter in September, but they certainly matter in December when you're fighting for seeding. And we saw how the seeding really shaped up for the AFC, where the Bills got the 2 seed, the Ravens got the 3 seed. And of course, that game in Orchard Park, it's a very tough place to play, especially when you get down to the January weather. So of course, both teams looking to get the best of the other here in a new season. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's all about giving yourself the best chance to go on a run in the postseason. And I think that's what both of these teams are obviously aspiring to do. And whether you're hosting Kansas City, you're hosting Buffalo, you're hosting Baltimore, you don't want to go to those places. And so obviously there's a lot on the line in week 1. Now, week 1 can be a liar. We know that. And by the end of the year, week 1 will probably feel like 100 years ago. But this is what's at stake for both of these teams. You want that head-to-head tiebreaker. And so as we start to really dive into this matchup, Kevin, what's the big thing for Baltimore here entering week 1?
I think obviously it's a new season, and that's what the Ravens have been telling us. You know, that divisional round game, obviously very high stakes, and the way that it ended for Baltimore was unfortunate. They just made too many mistakes, and credit to the Bills, they capitalized on those mistakes and were able to get the job done. You know, Mark Andrews has talked about it after his rough game. You know, Lamar Jackson had a couple of those turnovers as well. Lamar talked to the media on Wednesday and essentially said, hey, let's not turn the ball over this time. Like, that's the big thing for Baltimore. And I think it's interesting because on the injury side of things, both teams are dealing with some question marks when it comes to some key contributors. For the Ravens, Isaiah Likely and Patrick Ricard both did not practice. We got word from Ian Rappaport on Wednesday that it's unlikely that Likely will play in this game. Jair Alexander, though, one of their free agent additions, he did return to practice. And I think that for this game, at least, the name of the game might just be depth. And for the Ravens, they are deep. The Bills, they are deep as well. But I think at certain spots, you know, obviously, I know we'll get to the Bills side of things in a minute here, but Mark Andrews, I think, is in line, hopefully for his sake, for a big game. Now, we'll talk about some of the matchups a little bit later in the show, but the big storyline for the Ravens is just being able to start fast after what happened last season, which was an 0-2 start for them, and they almost went 0-3 if they luckily did not blow the game in the fourth quarter to the Dallas Cowboys in week 3, but they were able to kind of defy the odds on that 0-2 start. They made the playoffs, got the 3 seed. They don't want to go through that again. And for the Ravens' perspective, their schedule, they start off with 5 of their first 6 games being against division winners from last season. So they can't really afford to kind of come out of the gate, get that feeling out period. Neither can the Bills, right? It's all ships ahead, all things go. And for the Ravens side of things, they have to start fast because this AFC with the Bills, Ravens, Chiefs, et cetera, it's going to be competitive.
Yeah, the Ravens to me are a wagon once they get going. But to your point, yeah, they kind of had a bit of a slow start last year, and I think defensively at times they've started slow. And so if they can avoid that, obviously that's going to position themselves to go on that deep run and get those playoff games in Baltimore. When I think about this game from the Bills side of things and what that biggest story is for Buffalo, it's the defense. You know, the Bills have made significant investments in this defense this offseason, and they needed to. The Bills' third down defense was terrible last year. Talking about the 29th third down defense in the league. They're 23rd in EPA per pass. I mean, they just couldn't get off the field. They really couldn't stop the pass. And the offseason was about the defense, bringing in a Joey Bosa and Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt. And the Bills didn't have a ton of cap space. They made it work. They needed to get those players, and then they get to the draft in April, and their first 5 selections are on the defensive side of the football, including 3 defensive linemen and trading up for 2 defensive tackles. Well, welcome to the NFL. Here's the Baltimore Ravens and that dynamic backfield of Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. You better be ready to go. They've also made coaching additions with Ryan Nielsen and Mike Pellegrino and Jason Riprovich, very experienced NFL defensive coaches added to this mix. So it's all about this defense and how it can improve year over year. And it's been kind of like a 2-year decline. The Bills under Sean McDermott, the first 6 years, it was really good defensively, but the last 2, you started to see some chinks in the armor. I think some of that's aging, right? To Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer at safety kind of aging, and you've had injuries to guys like Matt Milano and Von Miller and Tre'Davious White. Those are supposed to be cornerstone players of your defense, and they haven't really been there over the last 2 years, and you felt that. And now the Bills have kind of reset with a new nucleus defensively in terms of personnel. Of course, it's, like I mentioned, the coaching additions, and now it's time to deliver. And boy, talk about a tough assignment. Week 1 against this Ravens team that I think they show up with 200 rushing yards and 30 points. And so it's a big task. And, it'll be looked at as a measuring stick game for this Bills defense, but I'm not sure it's going to tell the story. That's a lot that needs to come together against a Ravens offense with a lot of continuity and obviously a lot of firepower.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see from both teams' perspective. Obviously, there's a lot made, Joe, about how teams go about playing their stars or not playing their stars in the preseason.
Yeah.
From the Ravens side of things, they played no one, and they didn't play anyone last year, and they started 0-2. If we again kind of see the Ravens come out, there's a little rust or any of that, the Bills are a good enough team. In fact, they're beyond a good enough team to take advantage of that and say, hey, you're giving us opportunities again, like you did in the divisional round, go win the game. So it's going to, I think, maybe it comes down to which team starts the fastest. And another thing that I think is a storyline for honestly both the Ravens and the Bills is these were the 2 best red zone offenses in the league last season. The Ravens were number 1, the Bills were number 2. Their defenses in the red zone were kind of in the middle of the pack. The Ravens were 12 and the Bills were 16. So this could just come down to who puts the ball in the end zone more, because I don't expect it to be like last year's regular season game. Obviously, that was just like the Derrick Henry first play from scrimmage set the tone, and that was kind of that. Plus, we know the Bills are dealing with injuries on defense and the whole 9 yards there. But in my opinion, this is going to be a close game. We'll talk about it in the final part of the show. Could just be like, hey, Tyler Bass and no more Justin Tucker in Baltimore. It's now rookie Tyler Loop. Can those guys take advantage of the opportunities they're given? But are they even given opportunities? Because ideally, both teams, they just want to put the ball in the end zone all the time.
Yeah, you got to get in the end zone. You got the type of quarterbacks that score a lot of points. Hey, listen, the Bills didn't play their guys really in the preseason. This is the first preseason so far in Josh Allen's career where he didn't play at all. And the starters, I think, got maybe a quarter in the first preseason game, and that's it. So you got 2 teams that I think in some ways are coming in cold. Foil that against what the Bengals were doing with Joe Burrow. They're trying to start fast, and they said, Joe Burrow, go here and take all these snaps. You're seeing him get tossed around. It was kind of tough to watch, but we'll see how these contrasting approaches to the preseason and how that pays off when it comes to week 1. Getting ready for Sunday Night Football in week 1, and we're now going to focus in on the matchups that will change the game. I've got a bunch of stuff written down here. I'm sure you do as well, but I want to talk about CB2 for the Bills. This is a different situation than I think they anticipated. Obviously, Christian Benford's the CB1, but who's playing opposite of him? Well, they drafted Maxwell Harrison in the first round to do that. He's on injured reserve to start the season. And then it's a familiar friend, Tre'Davious White. Little opportunity there late in the season with Baltimore where he actually kind of played a lot better than he did early in the year with the Rams. He's kind of the guy that's going to play, and we'll see. He hasn't practiced in a couple of weeks. He didn't practice on Wednesday. They haven't ruled him out for week 1, but if it's not him, Kevin, this could be Dorian Strong, a rookie out of Virginia Tech, a 6th-round pick that could be starting against the Ravens in week 1. If not him, you're talking Jamarcus Ingram. Bottom line, it's a question mark. Even if it was Tre'Davious White, it's a question mark. And so, whether it's Rashad Bateman or the new addition Hopkins, there could be some opportunities there in the passing game for Baltimore against whoever's at CB2 for the Bills.
Yeah, and this isn't – the Ravens have put together the best receiving group of the Lamar Jackson era right now with obviously Zay Flowers, Bateman, Hopkins. Those are the 3 right now. I think you feel pretty confident. And even if Isaiah Likely doesn't play, which again doesn't seem very likely at this point, no pun intended there, but I do think that with the Bills, it's going to be a matter of can they shut down. Essentially, I'm going to put it on Rashad Bateman. I'm going to say like Rashad Bateman versus whoever is out there for the Bills could be a defining matchup because I think that you're going to want to send attention to Mark Andrews. You're going to want to send attention to Zay Flowers. And so you're going to put your top guys over there. And that's kind of like that's what you're going to do if you're Buffalo. But in my opinion, Bateman is kind of an X factor in this one for me because we saw the breakout from him last season. He and Lamar Jackson, there was a big question mark because they really didn't play together a ton prior to last year. They both stayed healthy. They both were able to establish a rapport. And we see with a more balanced offense with what Todd Monken runs, it's a lot different than Greg Roman. We see the ball put in Lamar Jackson's hands. He has the keys to this offense, so he's able to check out a play, something that was made clear over the offseason. Lamar didn't have a ton of freedom with Greg Roman. We've seen the evolution of Lamar Jackson over the last couple of years with Todd Monken. And in year 3, I expect that connection to be even stronger. But speaking of the Ravens offense versus the Bills defense, that guard spot for the Ravens, particularly the right guard position, Daniel Falele, there's been concern in Baltimore, not least the fan base and in pundits, not necessarily the team. The team is all in on him. But Ed Oliver, whoever's in the middle for that Bills defense, going up against the Ravens guards, even have the inexperience of Andrew Voorhees at the left guard position. Tyler Linderbaum, to me, is fine. You don't have to worry about Tyler. He'll do his thing. But the inexperience / question marks of the guard positions versus that Bills interior, especially for the Ravens, if they just want to power bully ball run, which might be a little difficult if they don't have Patrick Ricard in, which is a different conversation. We'll see if he's able to play or not. But this is kind of a good test for these guards early on against good players on that Bills defense. We know that for Buffalo, and I thought Buffalo's run defense was kind of given the short end of the stick last season. I think people talk about them like they are the worst run defense in the league last year at times, which they were not. They were not great, but they weren't terrible. I think that to me is a huge matchup.
The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
Bucs get a long-term extension done with a key member of the offensive line.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The news that broke Tuesday night, and that is right tackle Luke Goedeke is getting a 4-year extension. Now, the full year-by-year breakdown is not available yet, but the terms are 4 years, $90 million with $50 million guaranteed. That solidifies the offensive line for at least the next 2 seasons and locks up an up-and-coming tackle in the league. Wirfs is signed through 2029. Bredesen got his deal in the offseason. He's locked up through 2027. Barton is entering the 2nd year of his rookie deal, which means there's still the 5th-year option, which I imagine the Bucs are going to pick up. So he's under contract through 2028. And then Malk is signed through next season. Goedeke's extension kicks in next year, so he's on the team for the next 5 seasons and is now the 3rd highest paid right tackle in the NFL based on average annual value, behind Penei Sewell and Lane Johnson. And I know some of you are probably thinking exactly what my youngest son came into my room and was thinking and asked me, why would the Bucs give Goedeke that much money? And like my son, I'm sure a lot of you are basing that on the early impressions that you got when Goedeke struggled at guard. Since switching to tackle, he's been absolutely fantastic. PFF ranked the Bucs offensive tackle duo as one of the top 5 tackle duos in the league. Last year, Goedeke finished with a 75.8 pass blocking grade from PFF. And just for comparison, Penei Sewell, who seems to be the NFL's crown jewel, got a 74.1. Goedeke finished with a 73.7 overall grade. And not only that, but Goedeke has improved each of the last 2 years, showing that not only is tackle the more natural position for him, but that he can still get better. I think this is one of those contracts that once we're 2 years in, it's going to look like one of the biggest steals in the NFL. I also love the continuity that it shows the Bucs are dedicated to in the coming years. They love this group and they want to keep them together. The Bucs were one of the best offenses in the NFL last year with one of the best offensive lines. Now, that line is going to continue to grow and develop together, and they're all really young. The oldest player on the line is Ben Bredesen, who was 27. All the other guys on that starting offensive line are 26 years old. This has the makings of being one of the most consistent and dominant lines in the league for the next couple of seasons. This is great for Baker. This is great for Bucky and the rest of the running backs. And it's great for the Bucs, who locked up one of their priority pending free agents well before the offseason. One of the insiders, when I texted out the news, he reached back and asked which pending free agent would potentially be next in line for that extension. And going through the list, I would say it's either going to be Cade Otton or Zion McCollum. With McCollum, it gets a little tricky because if he continues to improve and has his best season yet in 2025, then he could potentially cost himself millions of dollars a year by signing early. So I think that's more of the long shot between these two. With Otton, he knows that he can be a big contributor in Tampa, and he's part of what they want to do. On another team, he may not find himself in that type of role. He could wind up as more of a situational guy rather than the lead tight end. The one exception to that might be if Jacksonville was interested. Their current tight end is Brenton Strange. I think we can all agree, even those of you that have reached out to me with your, we'll say, concerns about Cade Otton. I think we can all agree that Otton is a better tight end than Strange. And then, of course, Liam Cohen used Otton extensively last season as one of the primary pass catchers once Godwin and Evans went down, and then even after Evans came back. I could definitely see Otton as that type of guy that just wants to stay with the Bucs. He knows exactly what he's getting. He loves the team. He loves the coaching staff, loves the front office. The money probably won't be too different on the open market if it's between Tampa and Jacksonville. And then, of course, if it's between those two teams, there's also no difference in the state taxes to take that into account. I do not see guys like Mike Evans, Hassan Reddick, or Levante David signing an extension in season. Evans and David are going to take time and think about things as far as whether or not they're going to continue playing. I believe it's far more likely that Evans signs another deal rather than Levante. I'm already on record in saying that I believe this is Levante's last season in the NFL, but the Bucs aren't going to rush either of those deals unless either of those players starts to make a little noise that they want a deal done sooner than later. They don't want to play with, this being their last year on their contract. They want a little bit of security. Those are franchise players. They're franchise cornerstones. So you make sure you take care of them. And if Levante or Mike goes up to Jason and goes, hey, can we get an extra year done? Can we do a 1-year extension? Can we do a 2-year extension? Let's get this thing done. They're going to go ahead and take care of that. Beyond those two situations, there aren't really a lot of players that I can see the Bucs being in a rush to sign to extensions. They do have a lot of pending free agents. I've mentioned that numerous times on this show, but it's guys like Greg Gaines, Riley Dixon, Charlie Heck, Shep, Vildor, Seaon, Deion Jones. Those are guys that you can kind of wait on. No disrespect to them. They're key contributors. They're important to what the Buccaneers want to accomplish this year, but they also aren't guys that you're going to say, we have to make sure we get this done right this minute, or, we're going to risk losing them in free agency. I don't think any of those guys are beyond replaceable. We know that Todd Bowles loves Christian Seaon. Riley Dixon, we're hoping, looks as good in the regular season as he did in preseason, but these are guys that you can go out and you can find replacements easier than you can players like Otton, McCollum, Evans, and Levante. So the only other big deals that the Bucs would or could probably do are Otton and McCollum, with the exceptions, of course, being Evans and Levante. But this is just another example of Jason Light and his team doing a great job in finding talent and then growing that talent to keep in Tampa. The Bucs lead the league in the percentage of their roster being homegrown, with over 80% of the players. And yes, you can look at a draft class like the one in 2021 and say that it was a bust, but they've hit a lot more than they've missed over the last handful of years. And their current roster is a perfect example of that. Not only that, but you can look at 2021 and say, you know what? Those guys didn't pan out over the long term, but none of those guys were detrimental. None of those guys were irreplaceable. The Bucs already had replacements lined up and ready to go.